From Music City, USA, it's David Hooper and Music Business Radio.
I'm Dan Buckley, sitting in today for David Hooper, and welcome to a special edition of Music Business Radio. My guest today has performed in the Spencer Davis Group, Traffic, Blind Faith, and his solo career has spanned 4 decades. It's an honor to welcome Grammy-winning Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steve Winwood. How are you doing today, Steve?
Fine, thank you, Dan. Very well.
Man, we're so excited about your show. It's May 18th at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle with a fantastic opener, Michael Franti and Spearhead. And this is also a benefit concert for Radnor Lake. And I know, Steve, you lived in England. Maybe you live in England and Nashville. You're familiar with Radnor Lake. Have you ever walked out there before?
Oh, many times, yes. You know, I do spend quite a bit of time in Nashville. I generally come over about 2 or 3 times a year and spend time there and get out regularly and walk around Radnor Lake. Yeah, not just around the lake as well. I go up into the hiking trails that go into the woods as well. It's a beautiful place and very well worth preserving, I think.
I absolutely agree with you. It's so gorgeous out there, and it's just another reason why people should get tickets to this show, support Radnor Lake, because I know it's important to you, it's important to us, and it's going to be a great concert. I don't know if you made it out there. It's a pretty new amphitheater. Have you actually seen the amphitheater yet at Fontanelle Mansion?
I haven't actually, no, but I've heard that it's a great place, and I know that there've been 1 or 2 concerts there already. I think Steely Dan played there, didn't they? I think last year, and of course I was out on the road with them in Australia towards the end of last year, and they were saying what a great place it is.
What did you think of that Steely Dan show? I think it's amazing after all these years they can kind of reinvent it and make it so fresh, and I really liked what they're doing right now. Yeah,
I do too. It's almost refreshing to hear that stuff done live, I think. I mean, as it is with most music, it's one thing to hear the record, and generally the records are taken a lot of time over. I know theirs are, and mine are to a certain degree. You know, you take a lot of time over making a record to get it as good as you can, but there's something great about hearing stuff played live as well, and if you can actually be there and see it being played, it sort of adds another dimension.
Yeah, well, and I think back in the day, like the Steely Dan tracks, they'd have like 5 or 6 session drummers come in, play the same part, and then just edit in the best of the best.
I've heard the same sort of thing. I think they do. Actually, Donald was telling me that they used to get all these great players in, and they were all rather scared or intimidated to talk to them, and that's why they got a producer, because they were too shy to talk to all these fantastic musicians. So they used to get a producer in just so he could talk to them.
You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio. On the way this hour, we'll continue our intimate conversation with Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steve Winwood and listen to exclusive live tracks as we gear up for his benefit concert for Radnor Lake this Friday at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle. Steve Winwood was just a teenager when he rocketed into the international spotlight as the prodigious singer of the Spencer Davis Group, which also featured his brother, Muff, on bass. The blues and R&B influenced rock of Gimme Some Lovin' and I'm a Man stood among the leading hits at the peak of the British invasion. Winwood's singing drawing comparisons to that of his idol, Ray Charles, despite his tender age. Let's listen as Steve Winwood revisits the band of his teenage years, the Spencer Davis Group, with I'm a Man and Gimme Some Lovin' on Music Business Radio.
Well, my body's
Steve Winwood, reliving the band of his teenage years, the Spencer Davis Group, with Gimme Some Lovin' out of I'm a Man. You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio as we gear up for Michael Franti and Spearhead and Steve Winwood's benefit concert for Radnor Lake this Friday at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle.
Hi, this is John Hyatt, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
Hello Nashville, this is Steve Winwood inviting you to join me for a special benefit for Radnor Lake. Join us at the Fontanelle, Friday, May the 18th, for a special night of music with me, Steve Winwood, along with special guests Michael Franti and Spearhead.
Reserved tickets are on sale now, online at Ticketmaster.com or charged by phone, 800-745-3000. Friday, May 18th at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle. Steve Winwood with Michael Franti and Spearhead.
Well, my mind's going through them changes. Help us all keep Radnor Lake a special place for Nashville and all of Tennessee. Stay tuned to Lightning 100 for your chance to win a pair of tickets to the show.
Hi everybody, I'm Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters. You're listening to Music Business Radio.
Welcome back to Music Business Radio, a special edition with Grammy Award winner and Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, Steve Winwood. So Steve, you've pretty much spent your whole life playing, writing, performing, and producing music, and things really got started for you at an early age. Can you take us back to the early years? Like, was it true you were like 8 years old the first time you performed in front of an audience?
Yes, I was. I came from a musical family, and my father was a musician, and he played 30s and 40s dance music. And I used to have to learn lots of those tunes. And actually, I started playing those things on guitar. Piano was my first instrument, but then I started playing guitar pretty early, when in the sort of mid-50s. And of course, the guitar was quite a different instrument in the mid-50s to what it is now. Of course, I didn't have access to sort of all those wonderful Fenders that were being made in America. Most of our guitars were sort of very strange German guitars that we'd have to do our best to make them sound how we wanted. But yeah, I learned to play all those 30s and 40s standards on guitar, and I was doing that with my father in his band, and then did various sort of things at school, and then I started playing with my brother, who had a jazz band, a sort of Dixieland jazz band, and I was probably about 11 or 12, and I used to beg these guys to let them play with me. And of course they were all about 16 or 17, and they didn't really want a 12-year-old hanging around with them, but I used to beg them, and they used to let me come and practice with them, and then eventually do a few shows with them.
How old were you when you were part of the Spencer Davis Group?
That started in about 1963, so I'd have been about 15 then.
And that was with your older brother?
Yeah, that's right. He was my older brother, and he's the bass player. And it was him who had the Dixieland band as well. You know, it's interesting because some of the earliest blues musicians to come over to Europe were actually brought over by a Dixieland band leader by the name of Chris Barber, and this man who's, I think he must be well into his 80s by now, and he's still quite active and plays, and he was very instrumental in actually introducing some of these early blues musicians and bringing them over and doing shows with them in the sort of early 60s. And there was a sort of association between Dixieland and blues in those early days.
I saw on your Facebook page, you said you were listening to some Howlin' Wolf, and you invited people to let you know what they're listening to as well. But did you ever get to perform with Howlin' Wolf? Did you ever sing background?
I never played with Howling Wolf live, no. I played on his record, the Howling Wolf London Sessions, but I never actually played live with him. Some of the people I played live with in those early 60s days were Memphis Slim, John Lee Hooker. Oh, there was a fella called Champion Jack Dupree and T-Bone Walker. He was a great guitarist, actually, a wonderful musician.
You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio with Steve Winwood. Coming up, we'll continue our conversation with Steve. And right now, we take a look back into his storied career with the formation of the band Traffic. Looking for a wider artistic palette, in 1967, he headed to the countryside with friends Jim Capaldi, Chris Wood, and Dave Mason, forging the collective spirit into Traffic, producing some of the most inventive and durable works of the psychedelic-tinged late 60s. Steve wrote most of the Traffic songs with Jim Capaldi. When Traffic first came to the USA, they landed in San Francisco in 1968 and were befriended by the Grateful Dead, Al Kooper, and Owsley Stanley. The promoter was Bill Graham. They played at Fillmore West and Winterland. Let's listen as old friends Traffic, along with Jerry Garcia, perform in 1994 at Soldiers Field in Chicago, the day they broke the record for attendance. It's Traffic and Dear Mr. Fantasy on Music Business Radio. That was Steve Winwood in Traffic doing Dear Mr. Fantasy with their old friend Jerry Garcia, recorded in 1994 at Soldiers Field in Chicago, the day they broke the record for attendance. Coming up, we'll continue our conversation with Steve Winwood and listen to more live tracks as we gear up for his benefit concert this Friday with Michael Franti and Spearhead, raising money for Radnor Lake at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontenelle. Tickets are on sale now on the concert page at lightning100.com.
This is Alan Shacklock, record producer to Roger Daltrey, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Jeff Beck, Meatloaf, and Babe Ruth. And you're listening to Music Business Radio.
From blue-eyed soul to progressive rock. A night with four-time Grammy winner Steve Winwood. A special performance benefiting Radnor Lake. This Friday night, the Woods Amphitheater at Fontenelle, one of Rolling Stone's greatest singers of all time. Lightning 100 presents Steve Winwood live. A charity show benefiting Radnor Lake. With special guest Michael Franti and Spearhead. Reserved seat tickets are on sale now, online at Ticketmaster.com or charged by phone 800-745-3000. This Friday night, the Woods Amphitheater at Fontenelle. Steve Winwood with Michael Franti and Spearhead, produced by Red Mountain Entertainment.
254624.
Hi, this is Lee Lockman from Chicago, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio as we take a look at the career of Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steve Winwood. In 1969, Steve Winwood and Eric Clapton, having worked together briefly in the short-lived Powerhouse Project, formed Blind Faith with Clapton's crewmate drummer Ginger Baker and bass player Rich Gretsch, though the supergroup lasted just one acclaimed album and tour. Steve wrote the majority of the Blind Faith material, and the one and only Blind Faith album debuted at number 1 in both the US and UK, and they were pronounced the first supergroup. They debuted at a free concert in London's Hyde Park on June 7th, 1969. Let's listen as Steve Winwood performs live the Blind Faith song Had to Cry Today on Music Business Radio.
Will be one to remember.
Steve Winwood on Music Business Radio, and Had to Cry Today from his old band Blind Faith, which was pronounced the first supergroup. Intending to mix English folk styles along with jazz and rock, Winwood started work on what was meant as his first solo album, but ultimately enlisted Capaldi and Wood in a reconvened Traffic for the landmark John Barleycorn Must Die album. An expanded Traffic lineup, including African percussionist Rebop Kwabwa, went on to make two of the most arresting albums of the early 70s, In the Low Spark of High Heel Boys and Shootout at the Fantastic Factory, expanding on the jazz and world music elements. A scaled-back lineup brought the Traffic era to a close with 1974's When the Eagle Flies. With 1977's Steve Winwood, a rich solo career launched in earnest. Arc of a Diver in 1980 featured the hit While You See a Chance, and subsequent solo albums Talking Back to the Night in 82, Back in the High Life in 86, and Roll With It in 88 produced era-defining songs including Valerie, Higher Love, Back in the High Life, and Roll With It. Steve Winwood's album Back in the High Life won 4 Grammys. From Shepherd's Bush, London, here's Steve performing Higher Love on Music Business Radio.
Think about it, there must be higher love down in my heart of hidden the stars above. Without it, life is wasted time. Look inside your heart, I'll look inside mine. Things look so bad everywhere in this whole world, but it's fair. We walk blind and we try to see, falling behind in what could be. Bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. That higher love keeps burning up. World's a turning, and we're just hanging on, facing our fear, but standing out there alone. A yearning, and it's real to be. There must be someone who's treated for me. Things look so bad everywhere in this whole world, but it's there. We walk by and we try to see, falling behind in what could be. Bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. That higher love keeps burning up. Bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. I could rise above on a higher love. I will wait for it. I'm not too late for it. Until then, I sing my song to keep the night alone. I bring it. Said bring it. I could light the night up with my soul on fire. I could make the sunshine from beauty's eye. Let me feel
You're listening to Music Business Radio. That was Steve Winwood and Higher Love from his 4-time Grammy-winning record, Back in the High Life. Stick around as we listen to more exclusive live tracks and wrap up our conversation with Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steve Winwood on Music Business Radio.
Hi, this is Grace Potter with my band The Nocturnals, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Hello Nashville, this is Steve Winwood inviting you to join me for a special benefit for Radnor Lake. Join us at the Fontanelle, Friday, May the 18th, for a special night of music with me, Steve Winwood, along with special guests Michael Franti and Spearhead.
See tickets are on sale now, online at Ticketmaster.com or charge by phone, 800-745-3000. Friday, May 18th at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle. Steve Winwood with Michael Franti and Spearhead.
Well, my mind's going through that day. Help us all keep Radnor Lake a special place for Nashville and all of Tennessee. Stay tuned to Lightning 100 for your chance to win a pair of tickets to the show.
'Cause I know that I'm not the big friends of boys with girlfriends. Oh, I know better than that. I know better.
Hi, my name is Miko, an artist on MySpace Records/DGC. You can visit me at mikomusic.com, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio. Coming up, we'll finish our conversation with Steve and find out about what his band will be like when he takes the stage at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle this Friday for the benefit concert for Radnor Lake, with Michael Franti and Spearhead opening. It was back in 2005 that Steve Winwood inducted his old friend Jimi Hendrix into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Steve Winwood was one of Jimi Hendrix's favorite musicians, and Jimi asked him to play along on the studio version of Voodoo Child. Let's listen in as Steve Winwood performs this live on Music Business Radio.
Lord, I'm a voodoo child. Oh, Lord, I'm a voodoo child. On the night I was born, I swear the moon turned a fire red. On the night I was born, I swear the moon turned a fire red. Oh, mother cried, Lord, the gypsy would ride. I seen her fell down right there. Mountain lions found me there waiting, set me on a eagle's wing. I'll find there waiting and set me on an eagle's wing. Took me to the outskirts of infinity, and when she came back, gave me Venus Bridges ring. And I'm so tired. Oh, 'cause I'm a voodoo child.
Lord knows you feel no pain. Real love that you and your seed, Lord knows you feel no pain. I'm a million miles away, but at the same time right here in your picture frame.
Steve Winwood on Music Business Radio with his take on Jimi Hendrix's Voodoo Child, which he did perform on the original studio version as well. Following 1990's Refugees of the Heart, Winwood and Capaldi returned as Traffic for the 1994 Far From Home album and tour, the latter documented in the CD-DVD release, The Last Great Traffic Jam. In 1997, Winwood teamed up with producer Narada Michael Walden for Junction 7. In 2003, the critically acclaimed About Time was released, which saw Winwood returning to the free-flowing spirit of some of his most enduring music. The 2008 follow-up titled 9 Lives saw Winwood gain one of his highest Billboard chart entries. Currently, Winwood can still be found touring, predominantly keeping himself to the U.S. and Europe. But most recently, he has completed a tour of Australia and New Zealand with Steely Dan. When he's not touring with his own band, Winwood is still regularly collaborating with ex-Blind Faith bandmate Eric Clapton. Having completed a landmark 3-night stand at Madison Square Garden in New York in 2008, they've subsequently gone on to tour the wider U.S., Europe, and now Japan. Along the way, Winwood has also collaborated with and accompanied musicians from around the globe, including Jimi Hendrix on Electric Ladyland, Pink Floyd's David Gilmour, James Brown, Muddy Waters, Toots and the Maytals, Phil Collins, Christina Aguilera, salsa greats Tito Puente and the Fania All-Stars, Japanese innovator Stomo Yamashita, and African percussionist Rimi Kabaka, just to name a handful of dozens. You're listening to a special edition of Music Business Radio. Let's listen in as we conclude our conversation with Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steve Winwood. So you mentioned getting to play with your dad at a very young age, and now, full circle, you've actually got to perform with your daughter, Lily Winwood. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like? Did that make you remember being on stage with your dad? I'm
not sure whether my dad was as cool as I am, but that's, That's just what I think now. I'm sure my dad probably thought he was quite cool. And I'm not sure Lily thinks that I'm very cool now. But it was fantastic, and she did a great job, and in a way I try and be helpful and supportive with her, with her music. But at the same time, I want her to find her own direction, which she actually has. She definitely has her own direction in mind, and without much influence from me, but I try and help her where I can.
Well, I know Lily Winwood is doing her thing right here in the Nashville area, but you also have a son who's in the business, and I think he's over there in England, and maybe a DJ?
That's right. He calls himself a second-generation junglist. Yeah, he's a drummer, and he was principal percussionist in the orchestra for a while, but now he DJs stuff, and he also makes the tracks that he DJs as well. He puts the tracks together and composes his own tracks and DJs them too.
That's pretty cool, man. You got the musical family there. I tell you, I'm really excited to see you coming up here at May 18th at the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle. Can you tell us about the band? I know you're going to be touring through May. Who's going to be playing with you on this tour?
I'll have Jose Neto, who's been with me for quite a while now, probably 10 or 12 years I've been playing with Jose Neto. He plays guitar. And then I've got a percussionist that lives in America, but he's a Brazilian. Jose is also Brazilian. And a fellow called Cafe de Silva. He's played with Jose Neto for a long time. Then I've got a fellow from London called Richard Bailey, who plays drums. And then another young boy from England called Paul Booth, and he plays sax, flute, keyboards, he sings, he plays Irish whistle, percussion, he does lots of things.
It sounds like it's going to be awesome. Have you seen Michael Franti and Spearhead yet, or is that going to be your first introduction to them during this tour?
No, I've seen them many times.
He puts on a killer live show as well.
He does, yeah. A great show.
I hope everyone can join us. It's Steve Winwood, May 18th, the Woods Amphitheater at Fontanelle. It's a benefit concert for Radnor Lake. Michael Franti and Spearhead will be opening. And Steve, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, not at all. It's a great pleasure. And of course, I do listen to Lightning when I'm over there. It seems whatever car I get into, whether it's my wife's car or Lily's car, it's always seemed to be tuned to 100. So I do listen to it a lot.
That's awesome, man. That is such a trip. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, all the best. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Music Business Radio, a production of Tuned In Broadcasting Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. Recorded in the WRLT Lightning 100 studios. Music Business Radio is produced by Gary Crane, David Hooper, and Dan Buckley. Hosted by David Hooper. Special technical assistance by Tom Hansen. With Pro Tools post-production by Justin Hamill and Dan Buckley. And Lester chauffeured the band. For information on syndication, guest booking, demo derby music, or downloading previous episodes, visit musicbusinessradio.com.
Music Business Radio.